with the local side of things, being an alderperson, I think a lot of people are like, oh, if you're not in the House and the Senate, either nationally or on a state level, what are you doing? You're not making an impact. So where did you and why did you start researching becoming an alderperson in particular, as opposed to running for Illinois State Senate or, a national office?
Well, my heart was in my village. My village meant so much to me, believed in me, and I wanted to give back and serve in that way. And I hadn't thought beyond my local role. And even now, I'm asked often to consider a higher office, a state level or something else, county. But I really had a passion and a sense of responsibility in my neighborhood. We're talking about families that I grew up with, that I was seeing losing homes that they've had for generations because of bad mortgages. And in some cases, they had contract home purchases where I didn't know until I was alderman that they didn't own the properties properly, that they were on contract. And so there was one particular case that really shook me. A friend that I've had my entire life, over 40 years, grandmother lost her home. And I didn't understand how that could happen because they've owned the home for about 65 years. And I learned that she didn't have a traditional mortgage, and that the mortgage lender, which was a contract, decided they didn't want to be in the mortgage business anymore. And after she'd owned and paid on this house for over 60 years, multi-generations of the family, they gave her the option to buy the house at market rate. And of course, she couldn't do that at that point. She was in her 80s, didn't have the income to do it, ton of deferred maintenance. And then I realized exactly how much of an emergency we were dealing with in our community. My Black community was leaving. Really, it was an exodus. We had declined to less than 16% of the population. At one point, we had been near 25% of the population, and we were leaving because there was a declining sense of place. We couldn't afford anything. We didn't have the same access to anything in town. And those were some of the reasons why I ran. It's the reasons why I evolved to thinking about reparations instead of equity. Equity had proven to not be enough. And it's the work that I do full time now.
And what made you then leave office?
Well, I saw that outside of office, in working with in collaborating with others, as I've mentioned, that you can get a lot done outside of office if you have relationships with your elected. You can support them in different ways. Another thing to consider in being elected is I couldn't singularly focus on reparations. I also had a responsibility to care as much about potholes and bees and trees and infrastructure and other things in government that are the responsibility of the elected and that I couldn't choose. And additionally, being a local elected in our form of government, it was only $15,000 a year income. And it's certainly full-time work. In my case, I worked over 40 hours a week as an alderman, and to earn $15,000 for the year really was a stipend that went back into community, paying into everybody's GoFundMes and block parties and events and so on. So essentially, you're working without compensation, and I'm not independently wealthy. And there's another issue with the system that when you have these forms of government, you set up your elected leaders to be independently wealthy, which means usually white or retired or something along those lines, where you're not getting proper representation from the entire community. So I went into office knowing that I could do 4 years. It would be a sacrifice for me. And I feel very proud of what I did in 4 years and the work that I'm able to build on. And it's to be determined if I run for another office that would give me a full-time income that would make more sense for my quality of life. But right now, it is my life's work to continue expanding reparations locally, synchronizing that work so we can get a federal bill for reparations, because it will take a federal policy for Black communities to experience full repair. There's only so much that these cities can do. The city of Evanston being an example, we only have an entire budget of $300 million, approximately. It would take far more than that to repair the harm in the Black community. So the work is really working towards a federal policy, the United States government passing a federal law. Right now, reparations advocates are calling President Joe Biden to sign an executive order for HR 40 to establish that commission and begin to prescribe remedies for reparations.
Yeah. And with with all of this, there's the systemic stuff we talked about with the different layers. So in your ideal world or your ideal legislative abilities, if you had this your way, what would be the layers of what would need to be done to start to eliminate, mitigate, reverse this type of injustice that's been happening for 400 plus years? What would you like to see in the different stages?
So what we would like to see is an international law standard of reparations, full repair. There's 5 components to that. And the first is cessation or guarantee of non-repetition. So we want to see policy reform. We want to see the anti-Black policy addressed, and we want to see that changed at a federal level. We're working on it at local levels. Restitution and compensation are what is most talked about when you talk about reparations, some form of a check or a grant, but we certainly want to see more of that expanded. And then satisfaction is the 4th component of reparations, and that's going to be restoring the dignity of our people through culture. It could be, through hip hop as an example, but apologies, acknowledgements, holidays like Juneteenth passing as a federal holiday as a form of reparations, Black history museums, Black history in education, and so on. And then rehabilitation, addressing the trauma that we experience every day as Black people, seeing the ongoing police terror that we see, executions of our brothers and sisters in the street, the trauma that we live with, both lived and inherited. There is a science of transgenerational epigenetics that says that we have inherited trauma from our ancestors that survived the atrocities of the transatlantic slave trade and enslavement era and Jim Crow and so on. And so we really are looking for a full repair, and that in application can be access to education, business opportunity, land, housing, healthcare, cash benefits, a check, representation in government and leadership in various institutions. It is a comprehensive approach to repair, and not just a check, because a check alone without policy reform, without addressing zoning laws, without fair lending and looking at predatory lending predatory lending and predatory appraising, residential appraising and commercial appraising, without looking at police reform and all of those other areas of repair that are needed, a check alone would be insufficient, because it would go into an economy that is anti-Black, where we don't even have the financial infrastructure to float our dollar around. So there's so many things that need to happen. Collective, cooperative economics, we need to do internally. So some of this work with reparations, we need to do internal community work. We need to be in solidarity. We need to be supporting one another. And there seems to be such a great movement of that happening now, but we need even more support to strengthen our businesses and our capacity so that we can have more successes as we're committed to cooperative economics.
Absolutely. And I think the reparations movement also deals with, at least in my opinion, a level of healing, which I think is necessary, especially given the atrocities done to all Black people since arrival in the United States. But for you, in the Big Payback film in particular, you talked about how you needed to heal once you left your role as an alderperson from Evanston. So what did you need to heal from, and what was that process, and how were you able to do it?
Just the politics. It's politics can be very nasty, even at a very hyper local level, politics. And then to now move into being a reparations leader, recognized nationally and now internationally, it comes with a lot of hate from white supremacist minded Americans. And being a mother, and in the film it mentioned I'm a grandmother now, and having aging parents, working full time, serving the public full time, and getting hate from every different way that you turn was a lot to handle, and to do all that while earning $15,000 a year. So my healing continues. It looks like all kind of thing rooted in music and culture. One thing that I did was DNA ancestry to find out where exactly my ancestry is from. Learned through African ancestry that my foremother was kidnapped from what is now Guinea-Bissau, specifically the tribe of the Balanta people. Immediately after leaving office, I went to Guinea-Bissau, and I was able to unite with the Balanta village and spend some time there with the village, and go to some sacred places and be a part of some sacred ceremonies that really empowered me and centered me further in my work. And then it continued with just a little more ease, not having to work 100 hours a week, probably work 90 hours a week now, but owning my time a bit more so that I can have more safe and loving, especially on this Valentine's Day, thinking about love and joy, seeking that, and being in safe community with people that love me, that have poured into me. And so the healing continues. I think as Black folks, we always need to be searching out opportunities to heal, because we are dealing with trauma on an ongoing basis. But my trip to Guinea-Bissau, I since then have been to Accra, Ghana, had an amazing time there with a group of global reparations leaders. We went there with the Global Circle for Healing and Reparations, a cohort that's funded by the MacArthur Foundation. That was a very special trip. And knowing that every day I wake up and my work, my life's work, is to fight for our people, fight for reparative justice, to seek new partnerships and ways and resources to improve the life circumstances of my village, has been healing in itself. And I'm so grateful now to wake up every day and do this work in collaboration with so many others. There's a lot of folks that are doing this work right now. And since I'm on your podcast, I can't miss an opportunity to really encourage, first of all, thank you and thank the hip hop community for all that it's done for our culture, but even encourage and invite more leadership from hip hop. And so I have this crazy vision, and I'm a visionary, so cut it if I can't share this, but I think it's time for a 2023 version of something like a collaboration, like we're all in the same gang, but something specific to this message of repair and unity within our community. And I think hip hop has really the posture and the voice to be leading in this movement. I know what hip hop did for me as a young person in the 80s, being exposed to KRS-One and Public Enemy through my uncle who lived in the house with me. And later, Jahi Allah is a very good friend of mine. And I just know how it can heal and influence thought. And I would love to see more organized, intentional leadership from hip hop and reparations. I think that's the big missing link right now for us to get to that national commitment.
I want you to listen real close to me. I'm going to ask you some real simple questions, and I want some real simple answers. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Do you understand?
Yes, I understand.
You said that you couldn't have possibly been at the crime scene at 11:15 because you were in the bookstore buying my audio book and my hardcover book at 11:15 when the crime scene occurred in Soren's book.
The history of gangster rap.
So you couldn't have been at the crime scene because you were buying the books.
Right. At 11:15, I was at the bookstore at 11:15, and when I bought the books and accidentally left them at the store.
So at 11:15, you couldn't have been at the crime scene because you were buying books, right?
At 11:15, when I was leaving, it was some people coming in, and I forgot to grab.
But you don't remember who
what they look
people,
like.
what they look like or nothing, right?
No.
So, at 12:15, you were in the bookstore buying my audio book and hardcover book and Soren's book at 12:15. So you couldn't have been at the scene because you were buying the books, right?
Yeah, at 12, exactly, at 12:15 exactly, I was at the bookstore.
Now you see. You know you're not fucked up.
What you
No,
mean?
first you said you were at the bookstore at 11:15, and then you said you was 12:15. You know you're not fucked up, man.
He fucked up.
Yeah, he fucked up. You fucked up.
Man, you confusing me, man.
So, you get my book, my audio book, 40 years, and Soren's book, History of Gangster Rap, and if you don't, you know you're not fucked up, right?
Man, the more those cops ask me questions, the more I wish I bought them motherfucking books.